No, it's all.
It's dry. I think it's dry.
Because I'll be.
You know what? Showing up on
Yeah,
there, having two more
meeting
things
thrown.
to get down
But
on
then
it.
you guys will be the.
Stuff drying around and
Turn back.
How you doing?
Yep, just examination and some up there. Perfect. Where it is starting to take.
yeah, it's a terrible patio. Because the tree was in the patio.
Oh, okay.
It was right in the center of a patio. So when they cut it down, the crane had to come
You know what?
into the patio and then pull out pieces of the tree by lifting it over. Yeah, it was cool. It really is. And the crane is all the crane is all lit up, so you can see in the first line because it's at night. But yeah, there's a video on my night.
If not, I'll come out.
It was from that storm at the end of March.
Rolling.
Oh, you know, are you?
In our house.
See those?
Yeah.
Those were the good ones. It wasn't the end of maroon back in the day.
Well, we used those helmets with my sophomore and junior year, my senior year, your sophomore year. They had just a small blip. Yeah, small, very small. Yeah, right. And then the next year they went, I think, the bigger.
Big head, the Maryland.
Yeah.
I like Maryland probably better. I like the big cats.
Those are pretty cool. They were painted to put on your helmet, but they were wrinkled.
Enjoy this. I knew that. That's why I have.
You know, I was saying.
You're gonna get a recliner.
That's it.
I love this one. Oh, the answer. Fellow pal.
Rebellious.
Unless we're watching that.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, I got a call for a day that doesn't manage every day.
exactly.
You can take this. It'll fix it.
Right. You don't have to have a discussion. We talked about my. I'm not going to.
And then we're shooting.
How
There
about
should be another one. There were like,
on the way. When I talked. I talked.
Yeah, we just drink.
Carl, and I said, they're like, no, he's trying
No, but I'm certain. Now,
Carl.
I got one thing. And now that was
I'm doing that.
He said, this big board like my house is one of the stuff that he had me like 4 big packets.
About the same as Pat.
I must have one. What is this? It was me or three. Good stuff. Every bit, like every credit card share, like I'm gonna go through every line and put that in. I say no. No,
I made it.
I still got video. I'm still great. It doesn't know what. So you gotta go in there and look for it.
It is a little different. There's no way in telling there.
You know where they do it. That's what they told me.
Okay, it's.
Then all the ACH debits and things like that.
You're talking to the individual or saying? No, like, it's all good. Probably not much to expect on how we're sitting here.
Can I do another Pat?
It's on everybody.
Wow. Wow, I was with my mother today. Never asked her the same thing. I mean, somebody
By the way,
Oh, yeah.
so I came in the back.
I'll tell you what,
What happened was, first of all, got pregnant, decided he's not to come back. So then it got thrown on the other guys who probably are accountants.
no, it's not, he's been there for a while, but he's got very
There's 18 to 20 hours of my
And
time here and data and psychiatry.
huge families, 7, 8, 10 girls. Yeah, and all of them.
It's not
They gave us
put it in supply, I don't think.
just changed, everybody started.
There's no centralized.
They asked on Sunday, they tried to get a year increase because the kids were coming.
She hasn't been able to, so she is doing. I sent it all. And it sounds like she wanted to know the truck becomes, she's gonna put things where they belong, right? That's.
Your priest.
But this one is.
Wow.
This one.
My job was to handle the cloud.
Wow.
There's only other way. Does this absolutely?
Wow, you better- yeah.
Why is it? That's, it's a big enough pack. We're gonna pay somebody.
Either that or we-
Oh, we did.
So they went out and got the last-
We're trying. Hours. We're starting to leave. Your evidence, we can begin.
Good evening, everyone. Call to order this informational meeting of the Mishawaka Common Council with some invited guests and friends. The topic this evening is a presentation by Kittle Property Group with regard to the payment in lieu of taxes or pilot process and proposed development of Stone Lake Reserve. So with that, Mr. Prince, you might kick things off, or?
So to my knowledge, so payment in lieu of taxes, we do for Mishawaka utilities, for instance, the payment that's made to utilities. But to my knowledge, Becky, we do not have a private development that pays payment in lieu of taxes. My understanding from state law is that ability is limited to very few items. By statute, one of those is full income housing. So with that, we have, Brian, I'll let you introduce yourself. And then we'll get started. So really, self-good developers, informational sessions.
Yep, Council, thank you for being here. Brian Posen, Kittle Property Group. Prepared a little bit of presentation, just going through Stone Lake Reserve, just to kind of refresh memories since we got annexation back in January. Kittle Property Group is active in 18 states, over 145 properties to build. To date, we've developed 7,000 units in Indiana, 1,600 of those are senior. Recently, we've developed communities in downtown Indianapolis, and we have one currently under control. This is the site, 15503 East Douglas, and next to the hotel and the existing apartment north side of Douglas. 3 buildings, associated amenities, and parking. Reminder, it's a 55 and up community. Rents will be affordable for residents earning at or below 60% area median income. So the net rent there is $832 for a 1-bedroom and $1,011 for a 2-bedroom. Total of 234 units proposed. Amenities, open concept floor plan, luxury vinyl plank flooring, ceiling fans, washer and dryer included, fully accessible units, audio visual units available, and all other units are type B adaptable, which gives the ability to modify the units as residents' needs necessitate.
What does AV,
Audio visual.
what does that mean?
Folks who have sight or hearing challenges.
Okay, I thought you were referring to.
Audio visual. No, yeah. So just a kind of just trying to not necessarily fully blind or fully deaf, but just kind of an aging in place kind of concept. But we provide 2% of the units with those features. Mm-hmm. Amenities, community space in each of the 3 buildings. There'll be secure entries, fitness center, city nooks, breakout spaces, storage for rent, free Wi-Fi. On the site, we've got a dog park, covered outdoor grilling and picnic area with permanent seating, raised garden area, garages, bike racks, and across the street from Transco public transportation. Since annexation, we had a conversation about tax relief with Ken and John regarding just kind of initial conversations. We received our IHCDA, Indiana Housing Community Development Authority determination letter, which basically was our award for the tax credits and bond volume based on our application in December. Conversation further along with ownership to proceed with development plans. So right now we have commenced construction documents and are preparing with the city for final site plan approval, submission, and permit submission. We were initially targeting later this year. We're moving that up just to kind of escape winter hassles. And so right now we're targeting August 2025. And perhaps one of the bigger ones, we have Mishawaka Utilities Electric as part of a successful negotiation with AEP for partnering with MUE for electric utility on the site. It was previously, obviously before annexation, it was with AEP. So there was just a better desire to partner with the city. And so we were pretty pleased that we were able to get some relief there. The project request from the city is a pilot payment in lieu of taxes, and how those are usually set up. They take the resident income, other rental charges, which is the garage, storage, any kind of other miscellaneous charges, take away a vacancy loss, which gets you your net rental income, and then a proposed service charge, which can vary, and then that gives you your total pilot payments. So we've had success with pilots with Indianapolis the last few years, 2020, 2022, 2024. We're also successful in Columbus, which I know is not apples to apples, but it's the tax abatement process, 100% tax abatement. So with the pilot, the proposed terms is kind of the critical part of any kind of agreement would be payment to increase annually at a percent that would be set. We're proposing or asking for a 20-year term, and we would write in there penalties for missed payments.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sorry, how are those numbers derived? Is this just like the max potential rental income?
Yes. Yeah. So again, that's based on the previous slide, the 60%. The rent's kind of done across all 234 units.
Right, can you talk a little bit about it? I heard the question in 20 years.
Yep.
Can you talk about the financing for the project and how long they're committing for the low income? And how that matches?
That's coming.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I understand.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to lay it out there first and then kind of get a little bit in the weeds. So I think I'll answer the question here in a minute here. So why pilot requests? Most of all, not all proposed affordable housing developments request some kind of a local assistance, with pilot or tax abatement being most common. Tax relief is essential to ensure the reassessment of it. The property does not jeopardize the finances operation of the project in the future. And the main driver of that is because we're not able to raise the rents to meet market conditions. Annual rents are controlled by HUD. And while they may increase, they may also decrease. And actually, had we not gotten in our application in before the end of the year, St. Joe County had a 1% decrease in rents for 2025. So we're able to hold the 2024 rents, which are a little bit higher, but also just a little bit more protect the assets moving forward. Affordable housing operators, owners risk recapture the credits should rents not reflect the appropriate levels. So we don't have any flexibility there to, even if the rents market conditions substantially change, we cannot raise the rents. So why we would ask for this, estimated the $100,000 would be the tax impact for the city portion of the assessment amid the property tax cap. We acknowledge there's additional demand on city services, especially for a senior property with EMS. The senior property obviously won't use the schools. A fixed amount will allow better planning. That will be a schedule in the pilot agreement, which basically says at $100,000 is year one, and then every year will be outlined in the agreement. So it's very clear to all what that amount is for both parties to make sure that that's documented. And again, I mentioned there's an increase value, which we can negotiate and talk about. The service charge, 2.5% has been our experience standard with Indianapolis, but as you recall, I had 3.85, which gets us that $100,000. And we're just really pleased with the interaction with staff, with the community about moving this far with the project, that we're willing to understand. Again, Indianapolis is not Mishawaka. And I think there was a conversation just kind of saying like, well, here's what could make sense for the city that would be fair for both parties. And so that's where we kind of came to that 3.85 and 100,000. And again, it outlines the agreement to prevent future asks. So it's kind of a set it and forget it. How we came up with this, kind of looked at some comparables, notably some markets, some other affordables, and kind of came up with that 40,000, the valuation per unit, which seemed kind of a fair assessment, which gave us an assessed valuation of that 9.3, which at the 2% property tax cap, again, it's roughly about 200,000, and then the city portion is 2% of the existing 3.7653 of the local assessment. So that's kind of how we got there with the 100,000 and using that assessed valuation. The support, Stoneleaf will provide affordable housing at the 60% AMI and covenants for the land that are recorded with the land that will remain affordable for 40 years, answering your question there, Ken. Senior housing for persons 55 and that same covenants for 40 years. It's much needed housing for the city and region. Will employ a minimum of 4 persons throughout the life of the property. And obviously so far we've been a stimulation for annexation in the city, providing a new tax-based source that wasn't there before. Kittle will develop and construct the property, manage and own it for the life of the covenants. Also something we've done with the city of Indianapolis. We did not, they had an attorney who drafted the agreement for the pilot, and we reimbursed them for that service. We're not proposing to draft the agreement unless you make us, which I don't think it would be in anyone's interest, as conversations we've had. So, but we would offer to reimburse city staff or a legal partner for drafting the pilot agreement to make sure it meets both parties. And then we're also deferring the maximum allowable fee per the Housing and Community Development Authority to contribute to the gap. So then finally, just kind of a 30,000-foot view of where it would be with a pilot and where we would be without a pilot. So you'll see pretty much the numbers are pretty similar, except the mortgage, which allows us to, with some tax relief, allows us to take a larger mortgage to pay upfront costs that obviously we're looking to build the product new, build the product strong, and survive the lifetime of the property with the affordable rents that you can't make it up. So that's, and then, yeah, kind of the stars just highlight some of the things that are controllable, either from our investors of the tax credits or per the state agency that monitors the program, the state level for Fed. And so with that, that's kind of where we're at as far as the ask. So I kind of ran through that rather quickly just to kind of get it all out there because I anticipated questions and conversations. So I'm happy to pause there and see any other questions, clarifications.
Okay. Just kind of for my own thoughts. So for the pilot program, so it just kind of protects and holds the rate constant or controllable versus if it was not the pilot program, you're at risk of the assessed value fluctuate your taxes, correct?
Absolutely. That gives that comfort.
Brian, you indicated to staff that you've had issues with other communities. Can you describe a little bit of those, of what has happened in other communities regarding that assessed valuation?
Issues like
Of increasing dramatically.
Yeah.
I guess that's what we're looking for, and we all are familiar with the residential assessments that have gone out and the questions that we're getting from constituents. I'm just wondering if you would provide real life examples of that happening.
Yeah, I was not around for the. I was not around for the other pilots with Kittle. My conversations with them had been, yeah, it's variable. For better or for worse, Marion County is kind of a unique bird of where that kind of amount really came in. I will tell you, the take home, we're like I said, our request here is 100. Our last three properties, the payments were for about 200 units, so a little less than the 234 we're proposing, were 47,000, 66,000, and 63,000. So, and I think our conversation with staff had been like, well, what does the Indianapolis use to create that number? How do they get to that value? It's just something that I guess Marion County Assessor just kind of has their way of doing it, and they want to see affordable housing. So they're pretty flexible and a little bit more developer friendly, I think, to allow something that works for everybody as far as putting the dollar amount there on paper. So I will say, sometimes we ask for more, or they ask for more, we ask for less, kind of deal. It's kind of one of those challenges of meeting in the middle of what works best for the project and what works best for the constituents and the assessed value. So I will say, like, it is a challenge with affordable housing. It's just kind of an education of understanding with assessments. We've had conversations with St. Joe County about what this might look like if our 9.3 was kind of at least. The challenge is we won't know the true assessment until we're built. So it's a little bit of a jump of faith, but that's where that kind of that insulated clause in the agreement before we go to say there's a set increase that kind of protects against any kind of initial assessment challenges. But then, like you said, it's kind of whether it happens at that point, whether it goes up or down, we're still paying a percentage. And I will say Indianapolis, two of those properties were 3% of the payment to increase annually, and then one was a 2% increase every year of the values. I don't know if I've addressed any kind of challenges.
So what happens after 20 years since you've got a 40-year commitment?
Yeah, so a lot of these are dictated for 15 years because that's typically what affordable housing folks will commit to. And then after 15 years, you can apply for what's called a qualified contract, and you can get out of the tax credit program and get out of the affordability of it. So they'll refinance and go market rate, and so the income obviously is greatly increased. So for this one, since we're committing to the 40 years, we'll still have an ability to refinance after 15, because that's also when the investor leaves the property ownership. So then we'll have at 15 years, we'll have 100% ownership. But we'll refinance, and then we'll have 5 years of abatement, and then we'll have to, hopefully finances are better where we can kind of absorb the full taxes at that point.
You typically refinance immediately after 15 years.
Yeah, it's just at that point the property needs love, to be frank, and so again with the limited income and the affordability process, it's just it's allowing the properties to reset. And like I said, with the investor, they've got the tax credits flow over 10 years. So the investor, they're kind of skin in the game. It's 5 extra years as part of the ownership that allows them to, leave after 15. And again, we have 100% ownership, so kind of a little bit better of a negotiation for a good loan.
The assessed valuation projection was at 9.3.
Yeah.
Well, if you didn't do the pilot, maybe I missed it. What would the market rate tax be charged be roughly?
Yeah, I think at first blush it was like 600,000, and that's worst case scenario. We're kind of teasing out, but that was kind of the way right side of it, if nothing.
And that's the initial number. 600,000 would be the.
If it assessed as a worst case scenario, like I said, there's not the tax person of our company, but there's 3 ways you could assess it. And by state law, they have to take the lowest of the 3. So there's different ways of looking at it. We kind of teasing out all those options with St. Joe County. And again, they're willing to help to a certain extent, but until we get, sticks in the ground kind of deal, it's kind of just a little bit of a variation. And since, we're not obviously opening up today, market could be, one of them is market sales, kind of market conditions. So that could be a little bit different by the time we're finished with this.
So it's substituting that 600 for the 100 to kind of aid in the affordable housing.
Exactly.
I don't understand. I don't understand what you're talking about. I mean, I do, but I don't. So with pilot, does that mean you're paying the city $100,000 in lieu of taxes?
Yes.
And then does that increase over time as the value of the property increases?
It hasn't been said yet, but it's identified as 2% a year, yes.
Okay.
So what's the quid pro quo here? For that, anyway, you're not doing it out of the goodness of your heart. There's an advantage to you to partnering with the municipality on it. I think that goes to Kate's question, boil it down to the essentials. In exchange for the money that we're going to receive, what's the get for Joe?
Allows that reduced tax rate allows us to borrow more and to provide the upfront financing to make the project feasible.
In
Thank you.
right, and that's so. And this is a question for everybody. I've seen reference to, or I think I've heard reference to an ordinance that we would pass. Is there going to be a separate and used abatement or pilot in the disjunctive earlier, or is that truly what it is? By doing this, there wouldn't be a request for an abatement, or is an abatement somehow partnered with this?
Sure. So what I understand, and again, my tax folks kind of, again, not being through our recent ones, what it would replace is kind of any kind of other tax.
Mm-hmm.
It's other kind of tax assessment. So it overrules the agreement, and then is our kind of our tax agreement for the property for the city memorialized, and it kind of that's it.
And that's where I'm going with it. So it sounds to me that, and I need to go back and read the statute and refresh my memory, but we passed the ordinance that puts a hold on the normal property tax assessment process. It's frozen by virtue of the fact that we passed this ordinance, and in exchange for our willingness to do so, that's where the payment comes into play, so that we have the incentive.
Exactly.
This may be a question for John, or maybe one that we want to defer until the ordinance is drafted, but I appreciate that commitment to the 40-year term of the affordable housing component. How is that enforceable by whom? I would assume it's the city, but realistically, how is that commitment? And that may be a rhetorical question that we answer when we get to the ordinance draft.
So I would jump in. That's required. That's federal. That's conditioned with the tax credit.
So the feds are going to come knock on somebody's door with regard to those tax credits that they.
Yeah.
That's a reporting part.
So it's called the Land Use Restriction Agreement, LURA, which basically, and it'll outline our rents, it'll outline the term, and that's basically, that's our ticket to get the tax credits, and we won't have a project without it.
It sounds like it's recorded, it runs with the title of the property, it's not, yeah. So,
You got us.
so does that help a little?
Yeah, I was curious though, I still don't completely understand it. I thought you said earlier that the taxes, if it were, your tax payments would be less than the pilot. Am I incorrect? So if there was no pilot, so I can't see this. I really wish I had the document in front of me.
Yeah.
Instead of getting it by email later. But that's neither here nor there. So if there was an assessed value, so this has nothing to do with assessed value. This has to do with the rental income.
This is typically how they'll organize the pilots. It kind of, it's yes to both questions. It's based on the assessed valuation and the comparison of the valuation per unit as an affordable property.
I think this is what I was trying, again, I can't really see it.
Yeah.
So some of these numbers I don't think are quite accurate, but the important one is the black one, the 9.3 million. So it cost 50 million or whatever Brian identified to build the project. But the assessed valuation is not going to come back at that.
Right, I understand. So you have.
So that 9.36 is what they're estimating. So 936.
So what is the, what
0.03 equals $280,800.
is what the actual tax?
What the, based on that number, but as
Okay.
Brian said, that they take the lowest of the, based on
Okay,
determining that the assessed valuation.
so we're really not, I mean, we're comparing kind of apples to oranges.
That's their estimate of
That's
what that number
oranges, and the apple is the valuation per unit, or the income per unit, so that's.
Trying to kind of, again, I apologize, 'cause it makes sense in my head. trying to prove it beyond, like, trying to back up, give the support for the 100,000 at a later slide. So kind of, when you kind of look at it from the residential income and kind of when we outline this, because the income is going to be set, that's where we kind of get, that's going to be set with our project, and then kind of having that proposed service charge, which is right now just a number that gets us to that about 50% of the total assessment. Yes. So that 3.85, I mean, that could vary, I suppose, or it could just, like I said, that's just kind of something, and actually I think is a little less than 102, but it just kind of makes things somewhat simple for us all.
So then if we carry that out to 20 years, I'm not a mathematician, Tony, I know you're better at this, but this would be $2 million essentially, or it would increase over time.
Would increase. So that's for the payment to increase. And
I would really like to see that on paper.
Yeah.
You know how we have it when we do when we do abatements, we have that laid out in a kind of a graph, so we understand over the life of the commitment, we understand what we're really doing.
So that's typically part of the agreement. The initial agreement we'll sign, we'll have a schedule in there that'll say year 1, here's the dollar amount, year 2, you're going to go all the way to 20.
Okay.
And then, total it up, and so we'll be kind of clear on what the impact is.
We've done, and you have a good memory. We've done different types of support for senior living communities over the years, correct? But not a pilot. We've done some bonding.
The conduit debt.
Yeah,
They use our,
Right.
Our debt limit.
we have no license.
So to answer your question, over a 20-year period, their last year, based on a 2% inflationary, year 20, they're paying $152,000 with 11 in property taxes. And over that period of time,
It's year 20.
yeah, that's year 20. No, I just did the investment. I got to the back. So it would be close to $3 million.
I could ask in 20 years.
Over 20 years.
Share if I could ask a quick question and also a comment. So just again, wrapping my brain around this. I mean, technically it's a pilot, obviously, but my brain sees it as ultimately a 20-year tax abatement.
Right.
I mean, I understand it's not legal. I mean, legally it's a pilot, but I think from my perspective, it's a 20-year tax abatement. So I understand the benefit from the developer, and I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around the benefit from a city standpoint. Maybe you can help me, other than new development, tax base, low income. But my question is, one, what's the benefit to us? And then a follow-up question would be for Becky, since it's in lieu of taxes, how do those get appropriated or distributed in terms of do the schools or the library, all the other units receive their share of that?
So no, the other units do not receive a share. Very much like an abatement. Did 100% abatement, nobody received anything off the property. 100%. So this allows for, and what we were thinking, we've had multiple discussions. I know Mr. President, the council's had a little fire meeting regarding the cost of rent service. And because these are senior apartments to new ambulance runs, would be an issue on this project. So we felt like a pilot was a better way from an equity standpoint to address the issue while still allowing for the affordable housing. Because the affordability, just even looking, I sit on the Mishawaka Development Corporation, which did like Mary Phillips. And when you look at the rents of Mary Phillips, I believe these rents are actually, depending on whether utilities are included or not included, I don't know, are very comparable to that project. It's a low income, has a low income component to it. So these are very competitive
for the market. And that's really what the benefit is to the city, is to provide that. Because if you think of the older person or couple living in a home, they end up relocating to this apartments, that frees up that house then for somebody else, for the next family coming in. So we think there's a real advantage of having that density into the city. And to be honest with you, this type of development doesn't happen unless you have that. They can't make the numbers work,
Right.
unless you can. So
I get that.
either you want it or you don't want it. So we appreciate Kendall's flexibility because again, using the Indianapolis model, they were lower, they were going to do more here in Milwaukee. And that's what that 100,000%.
So we get to keep all the pilot, the city gets to keep all that money? 100%?
Well, we spend it, I mean,
I mean, we don't-
financial.
But if it was normal assessed valuation on property taxes, that gets split up like Matt says. This goes here, this goes to the city coffers, basically.
For the first 20 years, again, that's to do with the financing. Everyone out, we're trying to build the product that frees up more, so the vote raises entirely. So I don't like the image of, oh, we're trying to cut everybody out. That's not the point. We're trying to make the project work, and this is a tool that's been given to us.
And will there not be some property tax revenue that the other entities will receive? Will just be capped at that reduced assessed valuation?
I'm not familiar about with pilot. I know in terms of typical, like TIP, for example, they use the pre-developed rate and then the after rate. And so the pre-developed rate goes to all taxing units, and then afterwards, the majority of that assessed valuation goes to only the city for those infrastructure investments. I'm not clear on how that works.
Yeah, and
From
again,
my perspective.
I'm kind of asking questions to think out loud at the same time, because the way I would start to conceive of it is that by the passage of the ordinance, then we're going to reduce that assessed value to that $9 million figure that you said, which doesn't, it's not a 100% abatement, it's just a reduction from whatever the speculative assessed value would be if the county went through their regular process. In exchange for that, we're going to receive that $3 million over the course of 20 years and $100,000 plus increments. But if that $9 million is still the assessed value, it seems logical to me that the other entities would apply their tax rate to that $9 million, so that they have a diminished revenue stream, but still.
So Brian and John can weigh in on this, but to understand the pilot, you're throwing out all the assessed valuation. That doesn't exist with the pilot. So there is no tax.
So it's a 20-year, 100%.
Well, and that's the payment in lieu of taxes.
Yeah.
So instead of a tax bill, they have a payment that they have to make to the city, which starts at that $103,000.
And that $103,000 will reflect their total property tax associated with this project.
Their property tax is essentially zero over that period of time.
It's pilot is it all day long.
Right.
Okay. So it goes back to your question. The other entities would not benefit from this.
For 20 years.
Correct.
And then for the other 20 years, we still have the commitment with regard to the affordable housing. It's just that the payments no longer exchange hands. Everything.
Well, they stop making payments to us and start making a tax payment.
Yeah, let's start making.
We start making it under market value.
Yeah.
Unless you said there's something you're going to do after 20 years to potentially ease that.
So after 15, we'll refinance the property, just reboot the loan. So it'll be a different financial picture at that point.
But tax-wise, after the first 20 years, you're going back to regular taxation no matter what, or do you have another avenue to reapply after 20 years?
We could always come back and ask you again. I mean, but that's.
Woody will still be here with the
It's hard to say. I don't say that like to jest, it's hard to project what that would be at that point. And, but all it does is just kind of.
I think that's mainly mean to ask so that we know that is a hard stop. Yes, the county can get full, any entity. And that includes everything, that's state as well.
Yep. It's just kind of a question of what's the market look like? What's the the tax credit could change by then as far as what it is and what can be offer for rents. And
If I could just ask for some questions or some information to be provided the next time we meet or what have you, just for my own reference, if we could do a comparison of, I guess we know what we will receive for the life of 20. Can we see the numbers of taxes that would be paid if it was assessed at that value to see the difference? And then also, we know what the city will receive if this pilot is approved. We also do see the amount that the city would receive if it was assessed and taxed normally. Meaning, I don't know, maybe we're the city.
I think that's going to answer two questions. So one, how much is Mishawaka giving up into the well for this to say we want this project? But then two, how much are we giving up the county and everybody else? So I love those two.
This is just property, not personal property. Is there any personal property? Are you taxed to that or they buying, because some of the appliances, is this just real estate?
Yeah.
What it is?
their improvements.
Okay. Would there be personal property? I know they're raising that assessed valuation over the next couple of years too. Like,
I don't believe so. I think the House of Labors.
they would not count.
Because if you don't buy the,
Um,
they're not owned by the renter.
this gets into a question. I think of personal property as machinery.
Right.
And that's an element. I don't think it is the
When
refrigerator.
it comes to real estate, maybe it doesn't back that way.
So what about business income? That revenue is not protected. Business income is still going to be taxed. It's taxed at state, local, federal. For this question, what we're telling you,
Oh, sure.
this isn't going to do anything other than stop the problem.
Income tax you're talking about.
Yeah. When they're going to have to report, they're still going to have to pay them.
Publicly held or something else. I guess publicly held is
Private.
Private.
Mhm.
Yeah, so not, whatever, I'm just sure hold it.
So I have a question I'd like to, kind of wondering why we didn't know about this back when we, did the work to bring you guys into the city, and maybe I just don't understand, how things work in terms of making the project work. I mean, it seems like you would have known that you needed to do something like this at the time. So kind of curious about that. Maybe I missed it. Another question would be, if you don't get this pilot, does that mean that there's no project?
I think to answer the question, they did, when they originally brought the project, they indicated that the low income
I know that,
project that was dependent on them getting the tax credits. So
right?
this was a progressive situation. So that they received the tax credits and now they're asking the city for our participations. And that's normally how the process works. If we can identify that better. But that, and really it is dependent on what the city is talking about. So again, in other projects, they've done tax abatements to achieve that threshold that makes the project work. We've never done a pilot, which is why we specifically asked for this informational session tonight, is to hear about it. If council, that's what we're looking for tonight, is direction. If you're not comfortable with going down the pilot, and you'll be making the decision later, so don't get me wrong. But
Right.
we didn't want them to file something and then have this discussion on the floor without having.
Right, I appreciate that.
Questions.
But when we do, our typical tax abatement, like 10 years is the max that I'm familiar with. So a 20-year tax abatement is a long time.
So I'm trying
So
to
it's just a
think.
comment.
So the low income, like assisted living facility, has used the financing mechanism that Becky talked about regarding using our credit to get a lower rate. We have not seen in my tenure, I don't believe, a senior property like this that we've done a tax. We just haven't seen. So,
And I looked up what Silver Birch pays and Hellenic pays property tax. It's less than half.
And that's because they have the financing or using
No,
our credit.
okay.
I'm not sure why.
No, I believe it. So there's different ways to do the assessed valuation. One of them is income. So because the rents are lower, they're paying less taxes because
It's based on the rents.
Correct. And so it can be based on construction numbers, which is more traditional, like in the mill. And I don't know, I shouldn't say that because it could be based on the rents, but it's based on a much higher rent. So they're getting twice the rent in the mill as they are at this project. So theoretically, they're paying twice the taxes.
So a follow-up question then to that would be, what are your options? Is pilot one option and then you have another option that's based on the income of the people that are going to be living in the, in your apartments? Are there,
No,
do you
no,
have
because
different options?
the rents are set. The rents are set. So
So this
either-
is your only option. So I don't mean to point at.
I get you. Yeah, so when we look at, our strength is the sweet spot. Obviously, I don't need to remind everyone in the room, like, the lending market's crazy, costs are crazy. So our success of making these work is having a unit count that is over 200, a location either in a qualified census tract or a difficult development area, which this was in 2024. It's actually no longer 2025. And then some sort of tax relief from the municipality that we partner with. And that's kind of what makes us, and then it's back to us to basically figure out, you saw that there's still a gap even with the pilot that we're just going to have to figure out if we want to move forward of, looking at costs and kind of being scrappy and creative and kind of taking that next level of how we're going to make this property and kind of using our strength as a nationwide company of trying to negotiate better lending terms and whatever we have to do to kind of make the deal as close as we can, and then it's up to the owner what kind of risk they or what kind of loss they want to take. Because we are committed to affordable housing, we've proven that over a substantial amount of time, and that's kind of also part of it, is kind of providing in the market that's obviously there's a need for it, and a market that's new for us that we would appreciate the relationship thus far.
So it's a $7 million savings.
Could be, yeah.
You guys.
Again, that
But that's over.
stinking cursor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's going where that difference is that just allows us to get a better mortgage to build the property.
So the 55 and under, that is deed restricted,
55 and older,
or 55 and older, yeah, that's deed restricted for how long?
40 years.
40 years. Okay, that means if you want to sell it, it's got to be to somebody else that's going to keep that, because we just had Whispering Pines that wanted to sell, and they wanted that taken off, and we said,
So that's where I was mentioning the qualified contract. So sometimes there's so the tax credit product, or how the tax credit works, is 15 years the tax credits flow. And that's called the initial period. And then there's a second 15 years that's extended use area or extended period. And basically, after 15 years, you have to be affordable no matter what. And states do it differently, and they say there's just been a push now to say 15 years is not enough in the lifetime to provide affordable housing, because folks will go through the qualified contract, and then they'll refinance and basically you have to put the project up for sale to anybody who wants to buy it as an affordable housing project. If they don't find a taker in a year, then they could go to market rate. So it's kind of an out. It was done. It's from the initial 86 tax reform, because they didn't know how the tax credit program would work. Obviously, it's been enormously successful. And so it's kind of like I said, states are attacking it, because then you have folks who just do affordable housing for 15 years, and depending on the market, they'll get out of it. And then municipalities are like, hey, we want to keep affordable housing. Sometimes the priorities change from municipalities, from development priorities, with the state allocation priorities of where they want to see affordable housing. But again, this, if we ever sold, it has to, it's recorded with the land, 55 and up, affordable for 40 years.
and then you said 4 employees.
Yeah.
Is that enough for all them people?
Yeah.
Well,
Seems
I took
great.
a few minutes at Google, and they don't think so. Your Google ratings are terrible.
Yeah. we've got a lot of units. I don't hide from that.
I'm looking for a good neighbor. So,
I hear you.
you know, if I'm gonna build, if something's coming in, I want to make sure that they're good neighbors.
Yep.
And so how do we make sure that, you know, not only do we, you know, the dollars make sense, but the neighborhood makes sense, and that, you know, once you come here and you spread all the love and everything looks good, and then 5 years down the road, they're falling apart, and then who do we call?
Yeah. Well, there'll be one call to make, and that's to us. So as a builder, developer, property manager, you have one call to make. I will say the difference between market rate and affordable housing is there are investor inspections, as well as the Indiana Housing Community Development Authority, who allocates the tax credits from the feds. They have annual inspections as well, and there's minimum standards, and there's protections not typically in place on market rate that basically, if we're not providing a product that is up to code, up to compliance with the rents, with the people who are living there, with the promises we made for application, with any kind of other credits, background checks, kind of stuff that we've got to go through to ensure that the safety of our residents, we could lose a tax credit, which basically kills the project, which nobody wants to do.
And what was the good one?
Well, it just depends which one you want to look at. The 1.6.
So in comparison, out of 5, so the Mishawaka Housing Authority is right now.
Then there's even some on from employees. So but that, I mean, that's just another link to this to make sure that the whole picture works out.
Understand. We've had some staff turnover as well on the property management side. And again, I'm newer enough to not be a part of all the angst, but there's a renewed effort to, we had, with all due respect, a gentleman retiring, and so we've got a new leader who's made an effort to kind of really clean up a little bit some of the lack of communication. It's all about management, it's all about communication, having a strong regional manager who can kind of go around to the properties and make sure the site managers are doing what they have to do. You know, I can tell you, and you know, again, you call us. I mean, if you see an issue, we're not one to run away from challenges. We're not perfect. And all I can tell you is, like, there are things that kind of help everybody, I should say, from, you know, keeping a property that everyone's proud of. And if we have challenges, then we would ask for help. If you see something before we do, to let us know, and we'll address it to your satisfaction.
You say you have 4 people on site, that's what you're saying?
Yeah.
What if they need to?
So our property manager, assistant property manager, maintenance supervisor, and assistant supervisor. Maintenance supervisor.
So basically all your maintenance and everything is outsourced.
No, we hire them. Pardon? They're staff of us. They're staff of the property. They work for Kittle.
Okay, so you have more basically people that you can call on others for this.
Sure. Well, contractors, we get, I mean, snow clearing, for example, is subbed out. Landscaping is subbed out. Other stuff, I don't know if we kind of get, you know, the light pole fixtures, getting that assistance kind of. Sometimes insurance gets us goofy about doing repairs of high. You know, we'll have our share of subbing out things that are outsourced. Sometimes, yeah. I mean, we try and get a regional maintenance roving supervisor or HVAC tech or folks to kind of help out some of those things up front, so we don't have to wait for somebody to respond and whatnot. So again, varies on municipality, but we'll definitely be establishing relationships in the community to kind of have as a backup that's outside.
I'm just curious. All the units, this is elderly people basically, 55 and up. I mean, you can have 55 people, you can have 60, you can have 70-year-olds. You know,
Right. I'm not elderly, are you? No, go on.
It's
I'm sure there are.
it's state statute. Don't show the message.
What I'm asking is, just for curiosity.
Yeah.
If you have, if they turn in, well, I don't know how they handle maintenance problem, but if they handle a maintenance problem, garbage disposal, not working, whatever, you have a time frame, basically roughly how long it takes to have somebody come out.
24 hours needed response.
That's not bad. Didn't I ask?
Disposal is easy, but some other things may not be as easy to address in that, also in that kind of timeline. But yeah, that's something obviously that we need to take seriously, and we try our best to do it. And unfortunately, some of that stuff happens most of the time happens on the weekend, right, when no one's on site. But again, we try and get local folks to be maintenance and to be the property manager, so they're able to.
I'm property manager for 14 homes and 92 students.
There you go. You know the
Yeah,
deal.
our thing is 24 hours.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
I have a question about crime.
Yeah.
Kind of curious about, it's 55 and older, but what if the kids move in or the
Yeah.
grandkids move in?
Yeah.
Do you have policies regarding that in terms of who can move in and who is kind of policing that, for lack of a better word? And I'd also be curious about, and maybe this is something you could provide us. Sorry, I'm going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I am curious about crime.
Yeah.
So I'd like to know about police calls and that kind of thing in some of your other properties. We really don't need to bring a property into our community that would, EMS is one thing, but if it's police, then that's a whole nother animal. So
Sure.
I'm curious about that.
Sure. So first of all, what we've just upgraded this in the last year. We're going to install license plate reader technology on the property. I don't think it's a surprise, but the dirty truth of senior properties, it's not the seniors who are causing the trouble, it's the guests. So we try and provide some sort of protection for them with the secured entries. So that's a fob or some sort of controlled entry, so not allowing the folks to get in. And if they're coming in causing trouble, at least we're getting infrastructure involved, that we can grab license plates, follow up on any kind of challenges, security cameras throughout the property. As far as living on the property, that is forbidden. They can't do that. That's against the tax credit. Technically, 20% of the units could be somebody lower than 55 in a circumstance. But typically we don't go anything below 40, and that's just maybe a caregiver or maybe a younger spouse. The incentive or the design of it is not to have children and to truly be a senior property with unique circumstances allowed as a possibility, but not the majority. So there's people in living, that's against the tax, that's against the tax credits. That's big problems for us if that's found. And that's where those inspections, multiple annual inspections from the state, the investor, they'll review the tenant files. They'll make sure who's on the lease, what's their age, what's their backup, the verification, to make sure that we are truly meeting the need of the folks we promised.
Do they evaluate police activity or criminal activity, your annual inspections?
The investors, the investors don't want their assets to be, a challenge in the community. So that is definitely part of the dialogue of how the property's been going and reviewing kind of what kind of impact all things, maintenance, police activity, upkeep, kind of the whole works.
Just make a big question about that more for John. If there are repeated calls, let's say there is a problem tenant or problem tenants, we do have the ability to fine and that type of thing. Do we have the legal ability to fine the property owner? Or does it have to go to the individual?
No, it's the owner. It would be a nuisance property if it turned out to be that way.
To follow up on that, if it continues to happen and it's deemed a nuisance property, then are we still locked into this 20-year deal, or can we rescind, or if it is deemed a nuisance property?
I think it'd take a big mark to get it rescinded.
I think it depends on how it's drafted. Right?
Yeah.
The intent would be not to have
Right.
it. You may have to move forward.
Right.
If you put that variable in, we're going to have trouble getting the benefit of selling that to investors. Or it says here that the city can take that away.
And again, I don't ever want to even be considered a nuisance property. I guess I want to reemphasize the communication. Mr. Kittle is proud of his portfolio and the work he does, and he is passionate about affordable housing and providing for folks. And I can, I stand as the representative, but I can say that we don't have problem properties. I mean, there's challenges for sure, but we're on it and trying to solve it and work with the necessary folks to stop it.
And how easy is it for you as the property owner to evict if a particular unit is a nuisance?
Yeah, so there is some ability for us to evict. There's also, I mean, by design of the state, there is some encouragement to try and help situations along that aren't life safety issues. Work with folks, kind of, second chances kind of mentality. But definitely we do evict. We go to court and to get that done. And again, I can't underemphasize when the tax credits are involved, that's just above and beyond just a bag Google rating. That's a serious deal, and it's just not something that even the best of affordable developers are able to kind of skirt around. So we've got to kind of act appropriately, swiftly, and I'm proud to say we do when necessary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
From my standpoint, I think this has been a really good discussion. I think these questions are raising issues that should cause us to pause. But the slide that you had with those rents that you're going to charge to these folks, to me, that's the biggest selling point. So I think that there is a real need for clean, safe, affordable housing for people to be able to get into at that price point. So from my standpoint, I'm open to continuing the dialogue and considering this, but I think that we're going to have to engage in a different process than we would normally with regard to outside counsel drafting an ordinance and it goes on the agenda and then we're setting it up for first and second reading. I think we're going to have to put together, at least my sense of it is that we'd be better off if some of the ancillary information, and what I mean by that is if we're going to treat this as being somewhat equivalent to the information we have when we consider a tax abatement and that financial information that Matt suggested earlier, I think that is going to behoove us to have that ahead of time so that we can see what the revenue stream would be if this had been built without the pilot agreement and do that comparison piece. So what you do for tax abatements, I always find to be very valuable. You'll project, here's what the revenue stream is now when it's undeveloped. Here's what it would be if it's developed. That is easier here because we're going to quantify the revenue stream in terms of that payment over the 20-year term.
So that I understand. How quickly, so normally when we do tax abatement, because everybody's familiar with the process,
Yep.
it just goes the week for the meeting. So how long are you looking for to have this information at a time, essentially digest it for the first meeting?
I think, and this is just my thought, but I think before it even comes to the agenda, I'd want to see the ordinance drafted by outside counsel. And my assumption is that it is going to be Kittle that's going to pick up cost for the drafting of the ordinance. And I think Randy, you're going to work with Randy Rappola.
Right. Yes, in discussion.
Perfect. So I think that needs to be part of it, that Kittle's paying for that. I think as soon as that's drafted and as soon as some of this ancillary financial information that Matt highlighted, and we can work with you to try to identify what is going to be most helpful to us. Send us a care packet, and I think that at a minimum, we're talking from the time that we get the care packet until the time that this hits the agenda, we're probably looking at like 30 days. So not
30 days.
30 days. It's not the kind of thing that over a weekend, I think we're going to be able to digest it. We're going to need to have some conversation. We may need to come back together with it. And it's not to absorb all anybody's time. It's just that this is new for us. And we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. What I struggle with a little bit are the questions that have been asked about the management, whether it's feed into a Google radar or not, and the crime and things like that. As we move forward and we see the packet, undoubtedly I'm going to continue to struggle with that. But what I'm trying to balance it against is if you analogize this to tax abatements, I don't know how the tax abatement owner treats their employees on a daily basis. I don't know how many calls there are. We get information about whether they're meeting the targets on, investment and employment numbers and things of that. So I think I'm concerned about that, but I think we kind of have a fair playing field. And there are no, so I'm struggling with that a little bit. I think it's valid for us to, and I don't want us to do anything to, on some level, partner with an entity. And I believe your firm to be a reputable firm. So, and I'm happy that you want to develop here, but we want to make sure that this doesn't, long after we're gone, become an eyesore and a drag on the community. And I do think that there's some ability perhaps to be able to embed some commitments in the ordinance, depending upon the flexibility that the law allows us to, so we can see what we can do there and try to get some keys. So the process, I think, has got to be much more sharing information for us with us, give us about 30 days to be able to digest it and come together and have a meeting if we need to, and then we can decide whether we're ready to move forward.
Mr. President, I know, I apologize for interrupting, but I know Kittle has certain deadlines that they have to meet.
Right.
I just want to hear from Brian what those are so that we
Absolutely.
they can make a decision accordingly that we're not going to be.
And I want to hear that too, but I will tell you that this feels to me that without some enhanced ability to digest the information, this dies.
I hear you. Really, like I said, we're targeting August closing, so we need to have, something in place for the review to kind of close. Probably 30 days before that, like a July-ish. We have to have some sort of reasonable, if not full ordinance, reasonable commitments, kind of nearly there. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't know how to give you a commitment other than pass them. Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's
I think that concludes us to prepare them missions.
Yeah, and I may be wrong on 30 days. I'm just pulling that out of the sky. It may not take that long for us to digest it and develop comfortable. It could be closer to, I don't know, but it all depends. It sounds like great. Barnes Thornberg's already put together a draft of the ordinance, so we're in good shape there.
Well, they're aware.
They're aware of it.
They got it.
Yeah, they should have something.
Yeah.
They can build off.
Right.
So we've got something there. Then I guess it's just a question of us helping Ken and Kittle understand what additional information that we're going to want as a group in order to
With the information that Matt asked about down, I love getting PowerPoint mailed to me also. Can we get that?
After the meeting hours. I
Oh,
don't have that.
thank you.
Kate
on that.
Yeah, I just can't read it. So
I can barely remember what else is not there.
I like that.
So I would say whatever thoughts we have, and if you can kind of capture that thought that you, or that suggestion that you made, Matt, Ken, do you want us to use you as the point of contact with information requests or ideas on what would be helpful to us to process this, and then you can interact with Kettle and put it all together. So folks, that's my thought on how we move forward, but that's just off the top.
But I'm just going to concur with that, is that just as soon as possible, we get that information, we can delve into it. And then I would appreciate, and I think that this conversation and dialogue is extremely helpful. And I think I would probably anticipate appreciating another one.
Another informational session or
Just another roundtable or informational or allow us to.
Work session, whatever we want to call it. And I guess that would be, it's an open question in my mind whether that's going to be before it goes on the agenda. I think it behooves us all if we have that conversation before it goes on the agenda. Rather than, get caught up and trying to reschedule things. So if our responsibility should be to get them what additional information will be helpful to us as soon as possible so that Ken can then coordinate with the developer and start the process moving forward. And then once you have a chance to be able to put everything together, you can get it to us, so we can talk about reconvening maybe in this very room. And I thought this was a really good way to talk through a somewhat confusing concept to the lay people. So I appreciate your patience with us on everything that you put together. So yeah, if we do that, ideally, if we can be pretty quick in terms of giving you our questions, then it sounds like we might be able to expect receiving something back in June, which gives us a chance to be able to come together again. And then if all goes well, look to try to make the first agenda in July, if not the last agenda in June. That feels reasonable, but my sense is that we're going to want to make sure that we know what we're getting ourselves into and what we're getting the community into. And that's not designed to be a criticism of this. It's just new and it's different. And we've had, we held captive to this, but we've had some other properties that feel to me like they have something in common with this that have been problematic. Out by Cave, I don't want to see 6 squad cars there. It doesn't feel to me like it's going to be that, but the more your lease is modeled on, if it's possible, the HUD leases that the housing authority uses rather than what a floor market apartment complex uses, that makes me feel better. I think you've got to be able to have as much authority under the law to evict an unwanted party as is the request. So any other thoughts on how we move forward, folks?
When would you like us to get the information to?
I would say about no later than the first of the week, if we can. Sometimes over the weekend is a little bit easier to press, but
I will send out the information to PowerPoint after a meeting tonight, and then I will follow up. This is a reminder to take questions.
thank you. That's always appreciated.
So is Kittle Properties, is Mr. Kittle the owner of Kittle's, the furniture company?
His uncle.
Oh, his uncle, okay.
One other thing I was going to ask is, those 4 employees, do you have a target salary that you have in mind or that you typically pay?
I do. I don't have that handy though.
If not, then maybe that would be another question.
Okay. Sure, that's easily.
I have one, and I think maybe you answered it. Do you have a commitment to own this for any length of time once we reach an agreement?
Commitment to own it? I mean,
I assume you're doing it obviously for normal business purposes, but I also know that there's a lot of money floating out there. If somebody made an offer, could you sell it after a year and make a lot of money, and then we're all of a sudden in bed with a non-reputable group that now owns it?
yeah, I hear the question.
I've seen a lot of private equity undervalued.
Yeah, with the tax credit commitment, it's not as valuable as if that restriction wasn't in place. So I'll say that. I mean, not to say somebody may want to buy an affordable housing. I think it happens. I just don't see it very often. And that's again where that qualified contract comes into play. We don't have that ability to even get to that point until year 40 to even get out of the affordable and then to make it market and then can kind of make the money and, have the rent set to whatever the market would dictate at that point outside of the restrictions of HUD. So, right now our commitment is 4 years.
Brian, what's the track record in terms of keep building and then keeping versus selling?
It varies. It truly varies. I'm not going to sit here and say we don't sell, because we do.
You had to say a percentage. What
I don't know.
is it above 80%?
No. We hang on to properties. We'll go through we'll also go through a qualified contract.
The properties that you hold, is it above 80%?
Oh, yes. Sorry, we hold, yes. And even if we went through the qualified contract, we'll still own it. And again, that's based on market. That's a dialogue we'll have with the municipality. Again, kind of coming back to it where sometimes locations of affordable housing outlives its growth and the municipality wants to see, a different emphasis. So it's kind of like, okay, the whole idea is this is designed, maybe not seniors, but designed to help folks transition, right? To allow people to to have affordable housing, not have to pay more than their income, percentage of 30% of their income for rental housing or for any kind of housing, and allows them to move on to homes and private ownership. And so, the idea is that sometimes the location of affordable housing and ideal locations can change, and sometimes it's good lifting up the whole lake, if you will, if a property can handle the market rents as opposed to be affordable anymore. That's a positive on the community. So that's just, again, something that you look at with that qualified contract. But again, it's not on the table here. So can I be presumptuous though and say at least we're kind of trending in a positive direction?
I think we're open to the consideration of your.
Fair. You had that practice. That's why you're president. No, I get it. I understand. I just, I have to continue to report along, and I hear that there's still, you're not kicking me out the door, so I think that.
No.
And again, a lot of it, was repeating myself, is because it's new. It's not a road that we've been down.
Yeah.
Brian, you said how many pilot has Kittle been involved in the state of Indiana?
So recently 3
That's total. That's all you guys have had. We'd be the 4th one.
for pilots, correct.
Pilots.
We've done tax abatement.
Sure.
Pretty good.
Yeah, we know many of the pilots statewide. How comes up with the see how they've been, what their feedback has been.
It's fairly a new process. It's
Yeah.
available, you know.
2021.
Yeah.
Quite proud.
Right.
How it was passed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the growing cities, Westfield, those, company comes in, they, so, system.
Well, again, we appreciate the information and the time that you spent with us this evening. You moved the process forward.
Great questions. I mean, again, I understand it. I hear you. And we want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Anything else, folks?
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Well, that,
All right.
we have many people saying, yeah.
Nice to meet you. What's your name?
Matt.
Matt, yeah.
Yes.
And there's probably another 4 that are in the hot with them.
I'll get Randy and
Yeah. Yeah. So he's
I'm gonna end this.
Oh, yeah.
Morning.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. But he's like pilots, yeah. No. Perfect. We could have done it, but I think that's